There are many kinds of gates in our lives. Some are a delight to walk through. They lead to life, to great joy, and we know that it would be good to walk through them. We have no fear of those gates. But other gates are less appealing. We've all faced them as well. Listen to one of our fellow Christians as she gives witness to a gate she never wanted to walk through. She said, "They then moved all of us to the main gate and brought their cars where they loaded the food they had taken and asked us to get in. Then they set the school on fire." That sister of yours and mine is one of the more than 300 girls kidnapped, taken into captivity in Nigeria. Some have escaped, but many remain in captivity with the insurgents from Boko Haram, the Islamist rebel group. What's it like to walk through a gate you haven't wanted to walk through? She knows. You know. We'd all rather avoid those gates. We'd rather walk only through the good ones, the happy ones, the ones that lead us to green pasture. But life, as it is, provides us with unhappy gates as well. Sometimes those gates are ones that have been built by people who want to treat us as if we were members of a group they could control. They don't see us as individuals. They see us only as a category. This story that you just heard from Scripture, the story about Jesus as the gate, is embedded in a larger story. If you were here during Lent on the Sunday when we read the story about Jesus healing the man born blind, it's in that story that Jesus speaks these words. Whether you've read that story before or not, whether you remember it or not, the man born blind is seen as not an individual, but simply as a category, a blind man, not an individual with his own soul and his own goodness, but just a blind man. When he's healed, in fact, some people, when asked if this is the man born blind, say, well, no. He looks sort of like him, but no. They had so categorized him that once freed from that gate of blindness, they couldn't recognize him. You and I have all been held within gates like that. People have categorized us in ways that were not life-giving. Oh, you're just, fill in the blank. A girl, a black person, poor, stupid, unattractive. Fill in the blank. You've been in captivity too, as have I, in that category that treats us as not individual, but merely one of a flock. The young women kidnapped and taken into captivity in Nigeria aren't seen as individuals. They're seen as, well, fodder, baby machines, potential wives, potential mothers for new Islamist insurgents, not as individuals with souls. But Jesus is a different kind of gate. Jesus sees each of us, whether in Nigeria or here, in whatever category you've been placed in, Jesus sees each of us as unique. He looks at you and says, there's never been a you before. There will never be a you again. God has made you. You are worthwhile. You are unique and individual. God has made you for fullness of life and freedom. God wants you to have free pasture and a cup that overflows with abundant life. This is Jesus, the gate that leads into a different kind of life from categories. The Jesus who's willing to spread a table for us in the midst of our enemies. The Jesus who wants to free us. How do you feel when you think about those girls kidnapped? How do you feel when you're treated as merely a member of a category and not as an individual precious soul? I hope, along with the First Lady of the United States, you feel outraged and heartbroken. I imagine Jesus is outraged and heartbroken too. Jesus, the gate, who wants to lead you into some other place, a better place. So what are we to do when people create these gated places where we are trapped? What are we to do when we create those own gated places for ourselves and trap ourselves? Along with Michelle Obama and Jesus, we might begin with outraged and broken hearts. But Jesus is the gate. What kind of gatekeeper do you imagine him to be besides outraged and heartbroken? If Jesus had been at the gate of that school, what do you imagine he would have done? Do you think he would have pulled out a rifle and defended the girls, mowing down the kidnappers? Is that the kind of Jesus you want for your gate? Some Christians do. But I believe the Jesus we follow is not that sort of gatekeeper. Jesus is the vulnerable gate. We don't know very much about shepherding in the ancient world, but what most scholars believe is that when Jesus speaks about himself as gate, he's not really talking about something that swings back and forth. That the place where sheep stayed was a kind of corral that had an opening in it, and that the shepherd laid down across the opening as a living gate. At night, the shepherd slept there, protecting the sheep, defending them against those bandits or thieves that would come and steal them away for less life. We know what kind of a vulnerable gate Jesus was, because like us, like those girls in Nigeria and like you and me, he experienced being oppressed and taken away as not an individual. Just as a troublemaker, that last night in his life, the night we call Maundy Thursday, you remember how he acted as the gate that night, the gate of life? When they came for him, he did not fight. Some of the apostles, it appears, had swords, and Jesus told them to put the swords away. Instead, Jesus was willing to lay down his life. To lay down his life so that he could be an example of peace. kind of peace that's willing to die instead of fighting. Now, maybe you believe in what these days is called the myth of redemptive violence. That somehow, if we just had the right power, we could fight off every bad guy who comes along and somehow make the world a better place by using violence to combat violence. Jesus didn't seem to think that way. Some say that Jesus' death on the cross was meant to be the end of all violence. All violence stops here, we might imagine Jesus saying from the cross. Never solve your problems by violence again, he might have said. Like those walking in the Mother's Day Walk for Peace in Dorchester this morning, he wanted to give a different witness. Our clergy, Sam Lloyd and Rainey Dankel, and many parishioners from here are walking peacefully, but I imagine with outraged and broken hearts in the streets of Dorchester. Some of them walking because their sons have been murdered by violence, their daughters murdered by violence, their sisters and brothers, their aunts and uncles, their parents murdered by violence. Some of those walking today are Christians, like the founder of the Mother's Day Walk for Peace, Tina Cherry. Tina is a Roman Catholic. She goes to Mass every day of her life. She knows that she has to pray to remain a person of peace because her son was murdered. Some of those walking today are Muslims who must certainly be rejecting the violence of Boko Haram and other violent Muslim groups who try to force their way on others. But the issue here is not what religious group one belongs to, but what way one chooses to live, no matter what one's religion or lack thereof. But I believe that we as Christians are called to follow the peaceful way of Jesus. It is a risky way of living. We can see this in his own life. To risk nonviolence is to risk your own life. But it is a powerful risk. It is a way that leads to abundant life. Have you ever asked yourself why those early Christians gained so many converts? We heard that story this morning from Acts. It says they shared everything in common. But what it doesn't say is that they didn't fight back. Not fighting back is a powerful witness, especially in our world. It's a powerful witness. Dangerous, risky, powerful. It says, I am willing to live for peace, and I am willing to lay down my life for peace. That's the kind of gate Jesus is. It's the kind of gate he invites you to walk through with him. Now, I know some of you may be thinking, I've been told this before, that I'm being naive. That somehow I just don't understand that the way forward in life is to use violence to combat violence. Maybe I am naive. But I have staked my life on a nonviolent, peaceful way that I take to be Jesus' way. It isn't easy to live this way. If you think it is, give it a try. I can't do it by myself. The only way I'm able to do this is that I know there are other people, Christians, Muslims, Jews, and people of no faith, who have decided to live this way. And I depend on Jesus to keep showing me the way. A Christian who lived long before us, whose day we celebrated this past week, a medieval English mystic whose name was Julian of Norwich, had a vision of Jesus as she was dying, or she thought she was dying. It was a vision of Jesus' passion, his dying, his love in dying. She saw that side into which the soldiers put a spear and where blood and water had come out. And she knew what that meant, as any of you who have ever given birth know also. Blood and water from your side is a birth symbol. Jesus giving birth to a new way of life. It's risky, yes, just as giving birth to a child is risky. But it's life-giving. When Julian looked into Jesus' side in her vision, she saw something amazing there. She saw a garden. A garden. What she called a fair and delectable place, where all might go in and out and find pasture. That's the kind of world I want to live in. I know we're not there yet, but I don't believe we'll get there by trading violence for violence. To get there, we will have to put down our weapons, just as Jesus did. We'll have to put down our guns and our knives. We'll have to find another way, which means we'll have to take up other weapons, weapons of outrage, weapons of broken hearts, weapons of tears, weapons that will break ground for a garden where all may go in and out and find pasture, where all may find abundant life, where everyone's cup may overflow. To do this will cost you your life. It will take a heart broken open more than yours and mine have been broken yet. It will take wallets that open to pay for a world in which all have abundance. It will require sharing, which most of us have lots to learn about. But it just might create a fruitful garden. And it might just be inspiring enough that others might begin to put down their weapons and might begin to share and say, I want to be part of that kind of world, not a world of violence for violence. So I challenge you today to put down your weapons, your guns, your knives, and any other weapon you have, to open your heart. It will be broken, because to live this way hurts. To open your wallet, to share with those who need. And you will begin to make with Jesus a garden where everyone's head is anointed with healing oil and everyone's cup of life overflows. But you won't be able to do it alone any more than I can. But with Jesus' help and the help of others around you, you might be able to live this way. After all, with God, all things are possible. Life abundant for all is possible. Thanks be to God.